No countdown, no dramatic press conference, no warning to the public, just alarms echoing through metal walls as astronauts aboard the International Space Station suddenly stopped everything they were doing and prepared to leave. And what made this moment truly terrifying wasn't panic. It was silence. Because space agencies didn't immediately explain what was happening. And for a brief window of time, the most advanced laboratory ever built was one step away from being abandoned in orbit, drifting around Earth with no crew inside. And this wasn't a one-time scare either. This was the result of years of close calls, quiet emergencies, and problems that stacked up faster than the public was ever told. Because the truth about life in orbit is far less controlled than it looks from Earth, and the moment astronauts are trained for more than anything else isn't landing or spacewalks, it's evacuation. Because the station was designed with one brutal reality in mind: sometimes the only way to survive is to run. And that reality hit hard during one of the most unsettling incidents when crew members noticed something almost invisible but instantly alarming. A slow drop in air pressure, not dramatic enough to trigger sirens at first, but wrong enough to make mission control freeze. Because in space, pressure doesn't just drop for no reason. It leaks, and leaks don't stop on their own, they grow. And as engineers ran calculations, astronauts were quietly instructed to begin isolation procedures, sealing off sections of the station, closing hatches, cutting access to modules, and suddenly the ISS stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a sinking ship. Only this ship was orbiting Earth at 17,000 miles per hour, and for hours no one could find the source, meaning the air everyone was breathing could disappear at any moment. And when the leak was finally discovered, it was shockingly small, a hole barely larger than a pin, yet enough to threaten the entire station. And what made this worse was the confusion around how it got there, because explanations changed, timelines shifted, and official statements softened. But behind closed doors, the concern was obvious. If a hole that small could nearly force evacuation, what else could go wrong without warning? And that fear lingered, because it wasn't long before another emergency unfolded, this time with no leak at all. Just a smell, an unmistakable odor of burning electronics drifting through the station, and in zero gravity, fire is a nightmare scenario. Flames don't behave normally, smoke doesn't rise, and toxic particles can spread invisibly through ventilation systems. So astronauts rushed to emergency gear, checking panels, shutting down systems, knowing that if a fire ignited fully, evacuation wouldn't be optional. It would be immediate. And while the public later heard it described as a minor incident, inside the station it was treated as a potential end-of-mission event. Because fire, unlike most space hazards, gives you no time to think. And that wasn't even the most unsettling part. Because while these internal threats were happening, danger was also approaching from outside. Something no astronaut can see coming until it's almost too late. Orbital debris, fragments of old satellites, broken spacecraft, even tiny metal shards moving faster than a bullet, and there were moments when tracking data showed debris passing dangerously close enough that astronauts were ordered into escape capsules, strapped in, ready to undock, prepared to abandon the station if impact became inevitable. And imagine sitting inside a small spacecraft, suited up, waiting to find out if the station you live on is about to be punctured by something moving faster than a rifle round. Because that actually happened, more than once. And every time it did, crews followed the same protocol: shelter, seal, prepare to flee. And the reason these moments don't feel dramatic on Earth is because space agencies work hard to keep them quiet, not to lie, but to prevent panic. Yet that silence created another problem: the illusion that the ISS is safer than it really is. Because the station isn't one solid structure, it's a collection of modules built by different countries, launched years apart, connected by seals and systems that must work perfectly every second of every day. And as the station ages, those systems don't get stronger, they get tired. Metal expands and contracts, seals weaken, electronics degrade, and the margin for error shrinks. Which is why astronauts train endlessly for evacuation scenarios, because the station was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to survive long enough. And that distinction matters. because when another leak appeared years later, the response was immediate and cold. Isolate, monitor, prepare escape vehicles. Because there's a hard rule in orbit: if the station can't guarantee breathable air, the crew leaves. No debate, no heroics. And what most people don't realize is that there are always spacecraft docked to the station, not as transportation, but as lifeboats, sitting there quietly, powered, stocked, ready to go. Because evacuation isn't theoretical, it's expected. And there were moments when astronauts slept strapped in their suits just in case, because emergencies in space don't wait for daylight, and that tension builds over time. Because every mission knows that if multiple failures stack together, leak plus fire plus debris risk, the only option left is abandonment. And once the crew leaves, the station becomes something else entirely: a massive, uncontrolled object circling Earth, dependent on automated systems to stay alive. And that scenario has come uncomfortably close, which is why later incidents were handled faster, quieter, and with less explanation, because agencies learned that transparency doesn't always equal safety. But inside the astronaut corps, the message was clear: space is unforgiving, and no amount of training makes it predictable. And this reality changed how missions were planned, how crews rotated, and how future stations were designed, because the ISS revealed something no one wanted to say out loud. Long-term human presence in orbit is fragile, not because astronauts aren't capable, but because the environment isn't stable, and every solution creates new problems: more systems, more connections, more points of failure. And while the public sees stunning Earth views and floating experiments, astronauts live with constant background awareness that the station is always one malfunction away from evacuation. And that awareness shapes everything, from how they sleep, to how they move, to how quickly they can respond. Because when things go wrong in space, there's no outside help coming, no rescue helicopter, no emergency room, just procedures, seconds, and decisions. And that's why astronauts fled the station, not because of one dramatic disaster, but because of a pattern, a series of moments where survival meant being ready to leave everything behind. And the most unsettling part isn't what already happened, it's that these moments will happen again, because as long as humans live in orbit, the line between mission and evacuation will always be thin, invisible, and waiting.